So, yeah, tonight's theme was obsession. I don't have a lot of obsessions. I do have one really big obsession, and unfortunately she couldn't be here tonight. So instead, I wrote this for her. I'm going to read this very short piece, and then I have a flash piece I'll read after that. So this is called, "You always say I'm never romantic, but I swear there's a reason. I love you. Whether sweetly murmured in the ear or bellowed in despair, it is a phrase so oft repeated it becomes useless. Better one should say, I want to devour you, or I want to be devoured. I adore you. Avowed less often, yet it too falls short of the fury that compels one to proclaim it. Better one should found some religion and burn as heretics those who do not share in the adoration. I want you. Want and desire are mere shadows of the carnal impulse to share a body. Better one should hack themselves to pieces in the absence of another's embrace. I devote the rest of my life to you. These words, hollow until the act of living is complete. Better to say in one's last breath, my life ends and you are here. I'll die without you. Perhaps the most insincere and unfulfilled oath of all. Better one should live tragically. If I do not say these things to you, it is not owing to a lack of affection, but to the brutal inferiority of the words. Know instead that I would be devoured by you, happily, because I am helpless and there's no way to tell you. So it's Friday night, we need a little levity, right? I'm not going to do that. Sorry. This is a flash piece that was actually in my writing sample that got me here with all you lovely people. This one's called Metempsychosis. At 12:06 p.m., the employees of Crenshaw, Rubin, and Lowe gathered in the break room of the fourth floor office. Most just milled about, holding little paper cups filled with punch. Others busied themselves, taping crepe streamers to cabinets or tying knots in balloons. Polite conversation, which always accompanied special break room events, was passed around with the punch. The cake looks great, Sheila. Did everyone get a chance to sign the card? Be sure to give the receipt to accounting. Although the lunch break parties were never much of a secret, the illusion of surprise was always maintained. Traditionally, the guest of honor was ignored for the first half of the day, like a major league pitcher in the late innings of a perfect game. And under no circumstances were they allowed anywhere near the break room. This prohibition might arouse suspicion if office parties weren't an almost weekly occurrence. After all preparations were completed, the special guest was summoned and the liturgy was read. I remember when George first came to Crenshaw, Rubin, and Lowe, he was just a starry-eyed paralegal. She's on to greener pastures, but there'll always be a place in our hearts for Joyce. Today we welcome back not only the best HR director that ever was, but a new mom. Once the appropriate toasts were made, the cake, always red velvet with white frosting, was divided with all of the reverence of a Eucharist wafer and passed out to those in attendance. So it had gone since anyone could remember, a comforting mundaneness that marked the rhythms of the office. Tori O'Connor, however, wasn't in the break room holding a little paper cup filled with punch. Instead, she sat alone in her cubicle, silently weeping. Her meager lunch, a bologna sandwich and green apple, sat uneaten in a brown paper bag under her desk. For it was the last time she took a long look at the desk she'd occupied for so many years. Her cubicle was more of a home to her than the small apartment she'd rented since coming to work for the firm. Mementos she'd collected over the years covered her desk, many of them gifts from office Christmas parties. There were promotional items stamped with the firm's logo, pens, notepads, a rubber ball filled with sand that could be squeezed to relieve stress. Photographs of Tori with the few co-workers she was close to hung on the walls, as well as pictures of her Scottish Terrier, Mac, now 3 years dead. As Tori sobbed, she wondered if she would miss this little world once she was gone. Even though it had given her very little over the years, this life was all she knew, and what would come next was a mystery. She also gave considerable thought to whether or not anyone in the office would miss her. There were a few people Tori regarded as friends, but those relationships were confined to work. Outside of the fourth floor office, there were only a few passing acquaintances: the superintendent in her building, the barista at her coffee shop. At length, she decided her absence would only be lamented until a replacement was found for her at CR&L, and no longer. In the break room, the office manager took a head count: 33, 34, 35, and 36. It looks like we're missing a few, but that's just about everybody. Carol, do you want to go ahead and bring her in now? Tori heard the swish of a polyester business suit coming down the hall towards a cubicle. A moment later, Carol passed at a low trot. We're ready to go in there, Tori. Let's get that cake ready, said the office manager. She removed the lid, and everyone crowded around the cake to have a look at what was scrawled in purple frosting. It read, "Happy 40-something birthday, Marge," from all of us. From a few cubicles away, Tori heard Carol uncoyly trying to convince Marge that there was something she needed to show her in the break room. The way the two women spoke reminded Tori of everything she despised in the world, the insincerity and predictability of it all. She hated them for it. Then she hated herself for hating them, and there it was, the sickness in her soul. The shadows that held her heart deepened, refused to dissipate, and reminded her of what she meant to do. She thought about the thing in her coat pocket, the cold, unloving thing she had carried around in there for weeks. At first, it was an ugly thing, something she was ashamed of putting in there, but by small increments, she warmed to it. It promised only one thing: a solution. Maybe not the solution, or even a good solution, but the promise having been made must be kept. She took the thing from her coat pocket, looked up at the pale fluorescence in the ceiling, and listened to the dull hum of the bulbs as a soft sense of calm enveloped her. A moment later, Tori O'Connor closed her eyes and took a deep breath. At that very same moment, in another part of the world, a hummingbird hatched from an egg. And when it saw the world for the first time, it didn't know anything about hatching or life. It didn't know anything about being a hummingbird. It had no idea how beautiful it was.